We're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on inside this unit and how to maintain it so it can best serve you. So first and foremost, we have the pre-filters, which were previously mentioned, our sediment and chloramine filters. These filters are the filters that you will change most frequently. It's highly dependent on your usage and the harshness of your water. For instance, there are certain window cleaners that are used to changing their pre-filters after one job because they had horrible water. Sometimes you might hit 5,000 gallons, which is the sweet spot, the optimal spot for, yeah, it's time to change this filter. This is the first line of defense for your RO membrane, which is the most expensive filter on this system and the filter you want to get the most out of. So there are a couple indicators to let you know that it's time for a pre-filter change. One is a sudden drop of flow. Now, of course, flow is going to vary source to source depending on what kind of home you're at. Maybe it's a residential home with crappy pressure. Perhaps you're in city water where you have excellent pressure. But maybe you're having an immediate noticeable change in flow. That's not someone flushing the toilet or anything. Maybe you were using the system earlier in the day and it's just not performing, but you know your source is pretty good. Well, it's time to change these filters because once they become fully saturated with all the stuff they're trying to take out, well, it's not really going to allow water to travel as easier. So a noticeable change in flow, definitely time to change your filters, especially if you've been using the system for a bit. You could also just take a look at how the filter looks. I've seen a system that had 14 hours worth of use in Brooklyn, and this filter turned entirely brown immediately, a lot of iron content. There are visual indicators that you could see from your filters, so if they look dirty, change them. Why risk damaging your RO membrane? For instance, you want to change your filter, like the Sediment filter. You're going to go ahead and take your filter wrench provided by the accessory bundle, and just like we did with the DI housing, the rear of the system, handle to the right, you're going to go towards you. And simply expose the cartridge there. And here's your filter. Sediment filters, you'll see they are the same whether you put them upside down or right side up. The most important thing is to make sure that you're getting a seal at the bottom. You'll see a ring at the bottom of your bowl. So when you change your filter, you just snug that in right at the middle, if you guys can see, and then simply reattach your filter housing. So on the other side of the pre-filters, you have the chloramine filter. Now this filter here is removed in the same fashion as the others with the filter wrench. Again, if you're behind the system, if it was to the right, you're pulling towards you. So it's almost like you're going clockwise. But again, don't get that into your head. So then you'll be able to remove the filter, no problem. And you'll be able to change this filter. The chloramine filter is important because it helps protect the RO membrane from chloramines, which is a treatment used in city water and urban settings where they are basically adding ammonia to chlorine, and RO membranes don't like that. So this is an important filter to keep an eye on, and regular maintenance will go a long way. So when you take out the filter, it looks the same on the top and the bottom. They have two gaskets. That's going to make a nice seal inside here. You can add a little of the magic lube here to your gasket for a better seal. It does come with a little silicone on the surface, but if you want to be more efficient, go right ahead and you can lubricate there as well as the pre-filter bowl. Then simply reattach to the housing cap there, and you can hand tighten it. You can stand on the front of the frame and get it snug. If you have any water coming out between here and here, you can use the filter wrench to make it even more snug. Okay, so now we spoke about the pre-filters and their importance to protecting the RO membrane. Now we're going to talk about the RO itself. So the RO membrane is inside the stainless steel housing. It's fastened together with these clamps on the top and the bottom of the unit, but for maintenance sake, we're only caring about the top. Now typically we say an RO membrane in this context would get about a year's worth of efficiency at minimum. That can and will increase depending on your pre-filter maintenance, your overall storage and care of the unit, and of course how harsh your water is. When it comes time to change this filter, in order to remove the top cap, we have to loosen the bolts of these clamps to be able to expose it. So, I'm going to go ahead and loosen one side and loosen the other. These are either a 9/16 or 14 millimeter, depending on what style tool you have. You can keep an adjustable on hand and use either of the previously mentioned sizes. Again, that's 9/16 or 14 millimeter, and that will allow you to remove the bolts. Never do this when the system is running or pressurized. It is highly dangerous because this is a pressurized housing, and you do not want to open it if there's any pressure in there. So while there's still water in this unit, it's not pressurized, it is safe to open. So we'll go ahead and take off our clamp. We'll just set that to the side. Next, we're going to step on the end of the frame, help give ourselves balance, because this cap is going to fight you on the way up. So you're going to want to pull up on the cap, and eventually you're going to expose this lip. Now there are times where you may not be able to see this gap right away, and that is where a flathead screwdriver can be used as leverage to get underneath. Now we got really lucky today, so today I'm just gonna cheat, and we're just gonna go in there like this. So now you'll start seeing one of the O-rings of the top cap. That's how you know you're almost there. And then wiggle back and forth so you don't end up smacking yourself in the face. And then this dribble. So the top cap can just hang. Now this will expose the RO membrane. It's helpful to have a pair of pliers or channel locks because it's not going to be easy to remove this filter. What you're going to want to do is use these to grab one of the spindles. And by doing so, you will pull the membrane up. The membrane is lodged into place with the brine seal holding with its lubrication around the end, so it's not going to move easily. So I recommend stand on the unit, grab that spindle, and pull up. Nice and gentle. So at this point, it's going to drip out some water, and then you place it to the side. Once you have the membrane removed from the housing, you'll notice a pool of water on the bottom. I highly recommend dumping said water because you don't want to end up throwing any of your rejected salts or solids or anything that's suspended in there to go into your new filter, especially to flow backwards through an intended flow direction. Once you've cleared the water from inside the housing, then it is safe to drop your membrane inside. I typically recommend getting it about 3/4 of the way in and giving it a spin and drop her in. I also highly recommend at any point you are changing your RO membrane specifically. Of course, I recommend with all filters, but your RO membrane, you want it to efficiently have a seal. So this is your brine seal. It's only on one end of the filter, and on our filter, you can tell what direction it's going to flow. So you know you're putting it in the right direction. So not only does direction matter for this filter, lubricating this seal matters, because you want to make sure that water is going to travel into your filter so that pure water may exit through the center of the filter. And nothing is going to travel past that. So, okay, we have our new membrane that's going to go inside this unit. Once you have it nice and seated, you can go ahead and get your cap. I'm going to push down, and you want to make sure you have no gap between the cap and the metal. All right, so now that we have our membrane capped inside the RO housing, we're not finished. Never forget to put on your clamp. It's because, again, this is a housing that will get very pressurized, and you want to make sure that it is nice and secure. When you're reattaching your clamp, you want to make sure that you're getting both the cap and the metal. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do this. You want to do this. And you know you're good because you can travel around. It's going up and down, nothing's happening. We are good. And then make sure you tighten your clamps. And again, you don't want any accidents to happen with a pressurized housing. So next, last but not least, the last stage of filtration on this system is the DI housing. The DI housing is going to polish off the remaining contaminants that are still in the pure water line. Now the pure water is going to come out from the top and hit this housing here. Should note that RO membranes remove about 95 to 98% of contaminants from the water, but there's always going to be a little bit left. So that's where you get your spot-free cleaning. It's from this DI resin, which basically, from an ionic charge standpoint, it bonds with the water molecules to pull out the remainder of the impurities. So when it comes time to change, you're going to want to loosen the housing as we did before. Typically, you're going to change your resin once you see a reading of 10 ppm, or parts per million, out of your unit. 10 ppm means this cartridge needs to change. Whether you're going to buy a replacement cartridge filled with resin, or if you're going to buy a quarter cube of resin and fill it yourself. If you do so, that's fine. You just want to make sure that you fill it up all the way to the top. This has had water run through it, and it has settled a little. Resin looks a lot like sand, but you want to make sure that it's not crackling around like sand. We call that channeling if you see veins of air and breakage. The best way to get around that, fill it efficiently, fill it to the top, obviously wear gloves, give her a couple taps to settle, and that will allow any weird clumps of resin to break apart, and you will not have any channeling. So again, your DI resin is going to polish off the remaining contaminants from your RO membrane. Your RO membrane, you should change that when you hit 80% efficiency, as we say. So depending on your incoming TDS, say it's 200 TDS and you're getting a result of 60 out of your RO membrane. That's a clear indication that it's time to change, because then you might also notice that you're going through a lot more resin changes. Again, your resin's going to have to work harder because of the contaminants that are hitting it. Both of these filters feed off of their previous stage. So when you think about it, the RO membrane is feeding off the health of these filters, and your DI resin is feeding off the health of your RO membrane. So with proper maintenance and care of your unit, your filters will take you through thousands of gallons. So the last thing I want to touch upon is storage for both short and long term, and best practices in maintaining this unit. So first and foremost, when it comes to wintertime, you want to avoid using your unit, especially during freezing conditions. And I'm talking in the colder regions. You know, if you're going below freezing, you don't want to run water through a pressurized system. So remember, your RO membranes are wrapped in fiberglass with your center tube wrapped around layers upon layers of membrane materials, netting, papers, fine materials. And all of this operates under high pressure. So if you apply the concept of constriction and temperature, not only are you going to have very slowed flow, if your unit is pressurized and there's now a change in temperature, what's going to happen from high to low pressure? Expansion. It's going to crack. Again, you want to make sure that you're not operating under freezing conditions. Your membrane will suffer, and more than likely, you will have both flow and purification issues almost immediately after the damage has been done. Now, if you're going to have the system sit for winter time, you're ready to wrap up, that's where the RO Guardian comes into play. Simply remove the RO housing cap, just as we did for filter maintenance. And then you're going to mix this with a gallon of either water or RV antifreeze. If it's wintertime, I recommend that because that can handle extreme temperatures and it's safe to use in the system. But again, only RV antifreeze. So simply you mix that with a gallon of it, and once it's diluted, you'll remove the cap and you will slowly pour in your mixture, almost like pickling it. And you're going to pour through the sides of the spindles and allow it to fill and travel down. At the same token, you'll want to make sure that you disconnect your pure water line from your DI. That way, there's no issue with any existing resin, nothing traveling beyond that. You just want to keep that to your RO housing. If you plan to let the system sit for a longer period of time, maybe it's not winter time, maybe you're going on a 2-month vacation, maybe you can't work, RO Guardian can help prevent any microbial growth from occurring in your filters. That's going to create a blockage of bacteria and microorganisms that have been sitting for a while, and that is going to affect both your purity and your flow. There's going to be problems. So to prevent that, there's actually 2 ways with this unit. One way is utilizing your flush. By utilizing the flush valve, and you have the ability to run water through the system, if you were able to run water at least once a week through the system for 5 minutes, that's an efficient flush. And then you can just close her up and wait till next week. Or if you don't want to deal with any of that, do the same thing with the RO Guardian except with water and let it sit. Pour it in, let it sit for your time, and then when it comes time to use your unit again, you're going to want to flush that out, which at that point I would recommend doing your initial hookup just like you would when you first unbox the unit. Disconnect your DI hose and allow your water to run for at least, let's say 10 minutes. That way you know that nothing residual is chilling in your membrane. So anyway, that's your basic maintenance for your PWP RODI single. Again, this system will take you a long way if you keep up with your preventative maintenance, keeping an eye on your filter changes, keeping an eye on how and where you store your unit, and of course, whether you want to utilize flushing your system to prevent the mineral scaling and buildup that happens to your RO membrane. So anyway, this is Brandon from Pure Water Power. Thank you for choosing PWP.